Hi everybody, this is Stan Slaughter. I work with Missouri Organic Recycling, and today we're in the last of June, kind of a peak season for composting. And these two piles are in the shade, they're under a big sycamore tree, but I put them on pallets. A couple of reasons. One is they get plenty of air. Second of all, it keeps the roots of the tree from coming up into the compost and eating our nutrients before we get a chance to use them. This is a big deal. If you're underneath a tree, your tree roots will love your compost pile, maybe a little too much for your sake. So we're in the shade. A lot of people ask, does it make a difference if I put the compost pile in the sun or the shade? The answer is no. Inside the pile is where the compost happens, and that's where the core is. We're going to talk about the core. This is the outside. This is the insulation. This is the skin. It's dry. It's holding heat in and holding the moisture in. So what we want to do today is go in here and homogenize the pile. What does this mean? We want the moist conditions throughout the pile. We want the dry stuff that's been the skin to come inside the pile and get composted. The outside stuff can move to the outside edge. It's already got significant compost action. We'll see a dark black core in here about 5 inches in. And so we're going to move this top layer off. This is some chives that just got put in here. I'll put it over on the other side. This is the advantage. I can just move things back and forth. So I'm going to start digging in right now. I've got my trusty spray gun. This is something you want to have on hand when you start to dig into your pile, because we want to moisten every piece of what we do. So I'm going to jump up here and remove the chives and come in here a little bit. You can see the food waste that's on top. There's a lot of people wonder what to do with their food waste, and they just end up dumping it on top. But the problem is that animals come for it, insects come, and it dries out. We lose the moisture. We lose the goodie, the ammonia, the nitrogen that smells bad, but it feeds the bacterial activity. That stuff disappears. And that's a little bit too big. If you have a piece of wood like this, cut it way up. Cut it into short pieces. Nothing longer than about this much should be in there. Now you can start to see leaves that have started to decompose quite well, a lot different than it is on the outside. Here's some skin coming in. So, like I said, micro-homogenization. We're just going to put this on low. And it won't be wet immediately, but it will increase the humidity in the pile. And as the humidity in the pile rises, this material will have more exposure to moisture and be more likely to. Okay, there's a piece of gardening material. I'm gonna go right down the outside here and get the skin. So this whole area here is the skin. It's way too dry. So as we turn it in, we're going to moisten it again. We'll mix it with the wet inside, the core. And it's really hard to water too much, because if it's too wet, the water will run through. But at least you will have introduced some moisture at a deep level. I see the inside of this pile is too dry. And one of the biggest things is just to keep moistening it. There's been plenty of food waste put in here. These are maple leaves. They're pretty much prime leaves for composting because they're sweet, just like the sap of the maple tree. So worms really love this. While we're doing this, it makes no sense not to put some green material with it. This is the browns, we want to add greens. So, fortunately, we have a whole bag of grass clippings from yesterday. And grass clippings are really good. They're full of nitrogen. If you keep them in a bag, they will start to smell bad pretty quick because they've got quite a bit of moisture, just a little bit more moisture, and then buried inside the pile. And we can guarantee that this pile will take off, get hot, and by getting hot, we're talking about the activity of the compost really increasing. Now we can mix this brown in with the green. I'm gonna keep doing this. Because your little bitty skinny green grass clippings won't last very long. And you should make a fairly decent layer of them. You want to make a significant change in the average composition of this area. See all those leaves? We want a mixture of green and brown everywhere. Go out and get the skin on the far side. By mixing it by hand here, see there's some old grass clippings, they were on the outside. They didn't have a chance to become a part of the core like this. So a little bit more water for these outside layers. Then we'll get the grass clippings inside the pile where all their moisture and nitrogen can go to work. Nitrogen is what produces the smell. And obviously from the smell of urine all the way to the smell of food scraps to the smell of these things after 3 days in this container, they would start to smell really bad too. That smell is nitrogen, and nitrogen is the key ingredient in protein, and protein is what this pile needs to grow more composting organisms. And when we have a wonderful diet for a lot of different composting organisms, they will come. They're already here. They've been waiting for the meatballs that went with the pasta. And that's what we're just giving them now. And you say, well, Stan, you didn't turn the very bottom of the pile. And the answer is, I really don't have to. I've got a wet, hot core. The brown juice that comes from that will sink through to the bottom and transform even a pile that's mostly leaves into good compost. Now, you don't really have to do this, because if you work carefully and add the green and brown as you go, every time you bring out your food scraps, put some brown on top of them. Summertime you don't have leaves, but every time you have office paper. This office paper is no longer bleached with chlorine, so it's not a toxic ingredient. And the ink that's on it is soy-based ink, so it's biodegradable. And in fact, the soy-based part is fertilizer. So you can literally add some brown, some shreds, and of course they're dry. So I use these mostly for my worm bins. but office paper shreds and food waste makes great compost. You can start to see this is a lot more homogeneous. This is a lot more, the browns and greens and the moisture are pretty much the same. It's not just a big wad of browns. It's not just a big wad of greens. It's browns and greens mixed together and moisture mixed in. When you get to that point, like this point, you can be sure that this thing is going to get hot. It's going to do its work. There's some dry leaves. It's going to do its work, and the magic thing is it's going to shrink. It's going to go from all these fluffy dry ingredients into thick black rich compost, and the pile will become more dense and it will shrink down in size. So when we come back to this pile later, you're going to see I can take this part I know is mixed and toss it over the edge back down to the level here behind. There won't be any skin because it's already, what was the skin is already mixed. Doesn't have to be perfect. Now I can take this stuff and pile it up in the back part of the pile and go down and get the skin on the front side. See that green grass? You know that that is going to fuel the growth in the protein content and the growth in the amount of decomposing organisms that are in the pile. So I would only do this once a year, maybe in the middle of the summer, to correct the fact that we didn't do a great job of layering early on. We had too many leaves. But point is, do it once, keep it moist, and watch it happen, because it will literally happen right before your eyes and it will shrink rapidly. You may be able to smell it as you walk by, that kind of little bit of barnyard smell that goes with this. That's really normal, and that's a sign that there's good action going on. So I wish you a good summer's composting. This is the prime season. This is when we have the best conditions outside for compost making, and by fall we're going to want to have this whole pile full of dense, rich black compost that we can harvest and put to work on our gardens. Hi, this is Stan Slaughter from Missouri Organic Recycling. We're continuing our summer series on composting, and last week we mixed this pile, stirred it, aerated it, and watered it really, really well. And if you can scoot back in the video, you'll see that it was up about here, and now it's collapsed and it's completely flat. That's a sign that it's really good, that it did work. We just checked our temperature. It's about 110. I think it was probably 120 at least earlier in the week, but it does cool off from time to time. So I want to open this up and just see if we can see the signs of heat in the pile. So first of all, notice it's black all the way through, and it's fairly homogeneous. There's a little bit of wet, dry leaves in the middle. That was on me, but we're trying to make this compost pile completely finished so it goes all the way through. So this is our thermometer probe. It's 20 inches long. It lets us take the temperature anywhere in the pile, and it goes from stable to active to hot, and that's actually a measure of the bacterial activity in the pile. Above 160, the bacteria start to die off. So this lets us know how well we're doing with our pile and how well it's mixed. So we've turned the pile over, and we can see inside here that it's uniformly wet.
And there's a little bit of barnyard odor, not a bad smell at all, actually kind of nice. This material is going to decompose the rest of the way. From here, there's nothing left to do. We're in good shape, the moisture's high, the bacteria will continue to work on this, and they'll eat until they're out of food. When they're out of food, they die. What's left over? The skins of the bacteria that ate all our compost. And the answer is, that's the compost. That's the stuff we want. Perfect plant food from bacteria that ate our ingredients.